My name is Kevin, and I was driving home from a business conference in Arizona back in 2023. I was on the I-40, somewhere in the middle of New Mexico, miles away from anything resembling civilization. It was 3 a.m., and my eyelids were heavy. I knew I couldn't push on, so I pulled off at a desolate exit, hoping to find a truck stop. Instead, I found a relic, a place called the Desert Star Motel. It was a crumbling, neonless building with maybe 10 rooms, and only one beat-up pickup truck was parked outside. It was either this or falling asleep at the wheel. The manager, a hulking man with a thick neck and suspicious eyes, rented me a room for cash without asking for ID. I got room 7. It was exactly as grim as the outside suggested. Stained carpet, thin walls, and a single, sputtering air conditioning unit. As I collapsed onto the lumpy bed, I noticed a detail that made my stomach clench. A small, clean scrape on the wooden door frame, near the bottom, as if something heavy or someone desperate had recently been dragged out of the room. The air was heavy with cheap disinfectant and a metallic, coppery smell. I was too tired to worry about it. I decided to make a quick call home. I pulled out my phone. No signal. This was common in the New Mexico mountains. I was just about to lie down when my phone suddenly flashed. A single delayed text message had slipped through. "Be safe, I'm worried." It was from my wife, sent 6 hours ago. Before I could reply, the phone went dead again. As I stared at the dark screen, I heard a soft, rhythmic thumping coming from the wall behind the headboard, like a weight attached to the pipe, gently knocking. The rhythmic thumping continued. I climbed off the bed and pressed my ear to the wall. The sound was definitely coming from the ventilation system. I looked up at the wall vent. It was covered by a thick metal grate, screwed in place. As I watched, a tiny, almost invisible cloud of white dust puffed out of the top corner of the vent, followed by a faint, chemical smell, like bleach mixed with something acrid. Someone was actively cleaning something or someone in the adjacent room, room 8, and they were being careless. I grabbed my keys and moved to the window. The thin blinds were yellowed with age. I peeked through them. My car was parked directly outside, and parked next to my car, slightly obscured by the darkness, was a white cargo van, its side door partially ajar. I could see the dark, empty interior, and leaning against the back wheel was the big, burly figure of the manager, talking quietly into a headset. He wasn't watching the road. He was watching the motel corridor. I backed away from the window. I had to assume I was in danger. I ran into the bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the faucet for noise. As the water ran, I noticed the mirror. It was an old, cheap mirror glued directly to the wall, but near the top edge, the silvering was scraped away in a tiny, perfect circle, about the size of a dime. It wasn't wear and tear. It was a peephole drilled directly through the wall from the adjacent room, room 8. My hands shaking, I pulled a small toiletries mirror from my bag and angled it up to the peephole from room 8. I braced myself. The view was slightly blurry but undeniable. I was looking into a small, sterile bathroom. Lying on the tiled floor, completely naked and inert, was a young woman. Her hair was matted and dark. The man with the thick neck, not the manager, but another similar figure, was using a long, thick roll of industrial plastic wrap to tightly bind her hands and feet. The metallic smell from the vent was now overwhelmingly explained. I stifled a gag and backed away from the mirror. I had to get out, and I had to call the police. I had witnessed a crime, human trafficking. I ran back to the main room door and started fumbling with the deadbolt. Just as I unlocked it, the sputtering air conditioner in my room suddenly roared to life, drowning out the sound of my unlocking the door. The loud noise was deliberate. It had been activated remotely to cover any noise I might make, and it was now too loud to hear anything outside the door. I ignored the noise and pulled the door open. I ran into the corridor. The hallway was empty. But as I took the first step, I looked back at the door I had just opened. The deadbolt I had just unlocked was now silently and slowly retracting back into the frame, effectively relocking the door by itself. I hadn't touched it. The stalker, or the manager, was using a simple magnetic lock controlled from the front desk. I was free, but he knew I was free, and he was sealing off my escape route behind me. I ran past the other rooms toward the parking lot. I needed my car. As I reached my Subaru, I saw the manager standing there, no longer by the cargo van, but standing right next to my driver's side door. He was holding my keys. His massive hand was gripping the keys tightly, and he was smiling, a slow, sickening smile. He raised his keys to his ear as if it were a phone and spoke in a deep whisper. "Sorry, we're all full up tonight. Try the next state." I didn't think. I reacted. I lunged at him, aiming for his hand. He was too strong. He shoved me back, and I hit the ground hard. I scrambled up and kicked his leg. That made him angry. He roared and grabbed my arm. I felt a sharp, intense pain as his fingernail, long and filthy, tore a deep gash through the flesh of my forearm. Blood instantly began to flow, warm and thick, onto the dusty asphalt. But the pain snapped me into focus. He was mortal. I pushed off him and ran towards the main road. I couldn't outrun him, but I could get to the highway. Suddenly, the white cargo van's engine roared to life. It wasn't the manager driving it. The second figure, the one from the adjacent room, was behind the wheel. The van began to slowly roll across the parking lot, aiming to cut off my path to the highway ramp. I was trapped between two large, determined men and two large, powerful vehicles. I swerved, running behind the manager's personal pickup truck. I saw my chance. I grabbed a fistful of gravel and dust and threw it directly into the manager's face. He roared and stumbled. I sprinted toward the highway ramp. As I reached the ramp, my feet suddenly slipped. The ground was slick with old black motor oil. The stalkers had prepared this route. I fell hard, my already gashed arm slamming against the asphalt. The pain was blinding. I crawled, pushing myself through the oil. The roar of the cargo van was right behind me. Just as I scrambled onto the main highway lanes, I heard the single deafening sound of a massive truck horn, a semi-truck, a huge 18-wheeler, far too big and fast, was bearing down on the ramp, oblivious to the drama. The cargo van driver had to swerve violently to avoid being hit, slamming on its brakes and giving me a split-second window. I didn't look back. I ran blindly down the I-40 median until I found a patch of brush where I could hide. I stayed there for hours, bleeding until dawn. I made it to the next town and called the police. They went back to the Desert Star Motel, but found it completely empty. No manager, no pickup truck, no cargo van, and no sign of room 8 or the woman. I survived, but the scar on my arm is a constant reminder of the night I stumbled into a human trap. I learned that the darkest places on the map aren't empty. They are clean, cold, and ready for the next arrival.